Well, hello, good people. Part 2 of Fixing Fred. Thank you for all the feedback after I put out part 1. The aeroplane featured in the book is being rebuilt to fly, and the gentleman who's doing it commented on the film. Secondly, just got back from being away, the sordid business of earning a living. I used this book a long time ago, Eric Clutton's propeller making book, when I made the prop for the Praga engine, and it was great, and I enjoyed using it very much. I didn't realise at the time he'd written another book called An Aeroplane Called Fred. A subscriber to this channel sent me a copy. It's a signed copy, which is absolutely tremendous. I started reading it last night. It was really nice unwrapping a parcel of goodies, so thank you, Malcolm. That was a superb gift. Thank you very much indeed. I have been pressing on. I'll move the camera around in a moment. Obviously, the centre section has gone. It's on the lawn over there, actually. The getaway driver and I lifted it off this morning. I drained the fuel out and generally working my way through. The idea is to sort of get the fuselage done. I don't want to end up with this whole thing ripped to 1,000 pieces. So the wings are in the Vauxhall shed, the tail and things are in there. The Ronca fuselage is just stored away for the time being, which is actually a good thing because I had a massive tidy up in the workshop, and I can get on with a lot more now. And of course the next thing with the Ronca is to do the wing spars, and now I've actually got space to get on and start shaping the spars. So having Fred in the workshop and putting the C2 fuselage in storage has been a blessing, and that shop is a lot tidier than it was. I know tidy is a comparative term with me. It's less of a mess. With the wings off and the rudder off and now the centre section, that's removed an awful lot of weight that was behind the wheels and the centre of gravity. So the thing is rather inclined to tip up. So we replaced a load of windows in the house, sash windows, with new double glazed wooden sash windows made locally by a very clever craftsman. Anyway, you had to change all the weights as well, of course. You've got heavier steel weights in now. So there's a great stack of sash window weights on the seat just to keep the centre of gravity a bit further back so it doesn't tip on its nose. As well as the sash window weights, I tied a piece of railway track to the back of Fred. It's an old fish plate, a rail joining plate. I found it on the Bodmin and Wenford Railway about 20 years ago, somewhere near Helen Bridge, very close to where the railway used to go between the houses, cross over the lane. It's rather a pretty spot. Anyway, I shoved it in the buggy underneath the getaway driver, who was about 6 months old at the time, and pushed it back to the car park. I knew it would be useful one day. One of the things I did this morning, once I'd taken the centre section away and the fuel pipes and everything, was take that fuel tap off. I rather like this fuel tap, but it was seized solid. It turns out there were two things that were seizing it up. It's working beautifully now. If you're a fuel tap fancier, it does have a particularly nice motion. This here is a sprung plunger, and it was stuck in, which didn't help, so it couldn't be twisted out of the detent. So I took the handle off, freed the plunger up, and it's had a good oiling. And then whilst the handle was off, I held the square drive in the vise and actually turned the body. It was quite stiff at first, and then suddenly it all freed up. And so I was able to turn the fuel tap properly and blast the holes out with compressed air. And of course I had put a small amount of fuel in it when I first collected the aeroplane, so it was all nicely soaked in fuel, which sort of meant it was lubricated, and it freed up a treat, and it's all nice and clean now, works properly. So I'm actually going to put that back on in a moment, and I attacked the aluminium bracket with a pan scrubber as well, so that goes back in there. So in a few minutes I'm going to bolt the fuel tap and bracket back in place. If you spotted the placard floating around, yes, it's loose. Right, well, that's much better. Off is horizontal in either direction. On is vertical like that. I want to run the engine again and try and get the electric instruments working. Got a voltmeter here, and then cylinder head temperature, oil temperature, I don't know whether you can see that or it's out of shot. Of course the rev counter is electric too. It always amazes me how much time you can spend messing around with electrical stuff. I'm not really into electrics. I don't really trust it. Call me cynical, but it didn't do Ted Bundy any good. This thing takes a couple of lantern batteries. They go upside down. I didn't know about this at first, but of course the chap who built this aeroplane is still alive. So I rang him up when I peered in this battery box and said, what kind of batteries does it take? He said, oh, lantern batteries, which is actually a jolly good idea. Now there is a lid, but I just fashioned a piece of bungee, the sort of stuff I use on the thruster trimmer, and it should, because there's a hook on each side, hold the batteries down on the contacts nicely. So hopefully that should work. So there's several switches along here. There's a bat and a master. I'm not quite sure how they're wired in. Anyway, let's try one. Nothing. Oh, look at that. Well, it's reading 12, which makes sense, as each of those are 6-volt batteries and they're wired up in parallel. So, well, that's sort of promising. So I suppose the answer really is to rig up the fuel tank again and get the engine running. Of course, it's such a nice afternoon, I'm not going to do that at all. I'm going to go and get the Aeroplane out. So we'll pick this up again tomorrow morning. I should probably attach a bit more weight on the back of Fred before I run him. I briefly considered the anvil and then remembered Wile E. Coyote. Well, that shouldn't take off. After all, who's ever heard of a flying car? Of course, not having the centre section on the machine means there was nowhere to fit the fuel tank, so it's held to a step ladder. The step ladder's got a piece of railway track across the bottom of it, so it's nice and, well, sort of solid. And the pipe here obviously is outside of the slipstream till about here, and just for safety I've put a piece of string around it there. Petrol on. There we go, see the bubbles going along the pipe. Excellent. Pipe's on nice and tight ish. Right, let's see if that battery still works. So battery on, master on. Not working now. It did last night because I tried it in the workshop. Ah, there we go. That time I went master on, then battery on. I can't believe it's that sensitive, but maybe it is. Anyway, it's reading 12, so I'll do what I did last time, or thereabouts. Right, I'm going to stick the mags on now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pumps, and a little bit of throttle. Well, it was a nice idea, but I've actually given up trying to run the engine. It kicked back a couple more times and caught my knuckles. I've got a glove on, fortunately, so no lasting damage, but it did catch that finger there. It's got a bit of a bruise on it already. All bends all right though. So I don't think I broke anything, but it was very, very bitey this time. I don't like bitey engines, so I think I'm going to fit an impulse magneto. I'm told one can put an impulse unit on the SR4s. So I think one at least should have an impulse unit fitted to it, which will retard the spark and make it much safer to start. It's a shame really, it started well last time, but I really don't like engines that bite back. The Ronca has an impulse unit on one of the magnetos, and it makes it so easy to start, and it only fires when it gets to top dead center, so the chances of it kicking back are minimal. It's several days later and now raining. The weather last week was fantastic. I flew every day, which means I didn't do a great deal of work on Fred. I'm trying to find a Lucas Magneto, an SR4 with an impulse unit. I've got several leads at the moment. I thought I might have one down in a shed. Nothing to do with those mags, they're just there because I was having a tidy up. I did find several other sort of interesting items. That's the propeller hub off my Blackburn Tomtit engine that I fitted in the Morgan three-wheeler. It's complete with the main shaft. That goes into the front crank disc, but Pat Bastock changed it all because we put a much shorter shaft on it with a normal Morgan cast iron flywheel. So I'm quite pleased to find that. It can go on a nail somewhere in the shed. I also found a serviceable airpath compass. It's a bit low on fluid, but it seems to work on all 4 cardinal points. More on that in a moment. The other good find was a pair of goggles. I was going to pull Fred's engine off the Aeroplane, but I'm not. I'm going to wait until I find a Lucas SR4, fit it, solve the starting trouble, work out if all the instrumentation works, and then give it a top overhaul. In the meantime, there's plenty of other stuff to go on with. As built, Fred had donut wheels and drum brakes, all covered in a neat pair of spats. I've got the spats, but I'm not going to fit them. I'll show you why. So this is a Fred wheel. I think the wheel itself and the brake are tipsy nipper, but the tyres are quite an odd size. I have looked them up. There's it here, 495 by 3.5 static conducting aero tyre. They weigh a ton. I'm sort of estimating that weighs 8 or 9 pounds, and it's all tyre. It's even thicker than Rachel Reeves. The tyres are available at great cost because it's actually a tailwheel tyre size for various Second World War fighters, including the Fairey Fulmar. I quite like the idea of it having a Second World War fighter tailwheel tyre, but I can't quite bring myself to use them for several reasons, including the fairly small diameter. Instead, I'm going to use these Barrow style wheels. You do see them on Freds and Flying Fleas and Luton Miners and things. As supplied, they came with these natty little ball races in each end, but the inner race diameter isn't enough for the existing axles. I'll move you in closer and show you what I'm intending to do. This is the starboard undercarriage leg off Fred. These 2 brackets here held the spat, and in due course I'm going to cut them off. Brakes were operated by a Bowden cable and a lever in the cockpit. Obviously, pull the cable on. I guess it ran through there. The brake cables weren't in place, but I guess it ran through there, and you pull the lever on and it expands the shoes in the little drum. The wheels have ball races, and the axle is 25mm in diameter, and the races ran there and there, and everything on this aeroplane is really quite nicely made, and the axle has been ever so lightly relieved in the lathe there, so the bearing in a race would sit there, and you wouldn't have to shove the bearings all the way up the axle. There'd be a little bit of relief as you slid the wheel on. That all works very well, and it's very neat. Because of where I fly from, and the fact I only ever leave the county for professional purposes, and therefore will only be buzzing around the few local grass airfields, I don't really need brakes or a tail wheel. So I'm going to remove the tail wheel and fit a skid in its place. And instead of using ball races running on this axle, I'm going to fit plain oilite bushes in the wheels. Now this diameter here, usefully, is 1 3/8, 1.375. I've measured it in several ways with vernier calipers. And oilite bushings of that outside diameter with a top hat section, so they have a flange on the outside, are readily available. Their inside diameter, however, is generally 1 1/8. I've come up with a solution of how to sort the axle out. The answer, as I see it, is to put a sleeve over the axle. Now, this is the right outside diameter. It's a piece of 4130. It's 1 1/8 or 1.125 inches outside diameter, but it's too thin. It's 20 gauge, so 0.035 of an inch. However, the 0.065 of an inch, so thicker wall, 16 gauge tube, same outside diameter, is a few thou bigger than that, a few thou only. If I was to slide a piece over there, it won't be a tight fit, but it won't be a really loose fit. I can drill it, and the whole thing can be held on with a 1/4 inch bolt that holds the wheel on. What that does, with the plain bushings of course, is it transfers wear from the axle to a separate sleeve. So if the sleeve wears, I can just replace the sleeve and the bushings without having to go to a great deal of fuss replacing part of the axle, because that would mean cutting all through the welds and welding a new axle shaft on. So that's what I'm going to do. This centre bushing in the wheel is a little bit deep. If I take the tyres off, I can, with my disc cutter, unfortunately my neighbour's still in South Africa, how irritating, I can cut this off fairly accurately. I think I can make a good enough job to cut that off, clean it up with a file, with a Dremel or whatever, file the edges, and then push in the top hat bush that way. Obviously, this is the inner side. It doesn't have the valve stem sticking out, so I want to move the wheel in as far as possible on the axle to reduce the bending load on the axle. And then I can trim off this outer bushing to the right length and fit the top hat section oilite bush in there as well. Of course, once the bushings are in, I could drill down through right in the corner at least and get an oil hole for each one as well, so one can keep the bushes nicely lubricated. It's another reason for not having brakes if I'm going to be smattering oil everywhere. Whilst we're here, I thought it might be fun just to take the top off this undercarriage leg. I haven't a clue what it looks like inside. I noticed in the early photographs of Fred, the fairing only went down to there, and then it's extended with that taper piece. I think it's all plywood. It's so beautifully made. Taped over there and see finished with dope and then painted. Anyway, let's see what's in here. So that's Fred's famous long travel undercarriage. I can't quite pull the leg out of the fairing, nor am I going to try to, because there's really no reason to. I can clean the grease off and grease it again, maybe dribble a little oil in here. There's a slot. It's not very easy to show you, but you might see a slot in the leg here inside the outer portion that's inside the spring. It's about 4 inches long, so that's the sort of undercarriage travel Fred has with this enormous great spring. It all looks in very good condition, apart from just a clean here and a bit of oil. I'm going to put it back together again. I took the harness out yesterday and attacked this upholstery with some cleaner. It was actually stuff for cleaning an Arga or a Rayburn, would you believe? Nothing else would move the grime, but it has worked a treat. I just sort of sprayed it on, left it a few minutes and scrubbed it off vigorously. It's done a really good job. With the starboard undercarriage removed, Fred is dangling from my engine hoist, but I've also put a ratchet strap through the roof joists, so if the engine hoist hydraulics give way, nothing will move very much at all. I mentioned a compass. This was Fred's earlier compass. It was under there, and as you can see, it's like a elderly man with cataracts. It was absolutely no use at all. In fact, I had to fish it out from the bottom of the waste bin where I'd thrown it. Of course, I found this really rather nice airpath compass the other day down in the hangar, and I'm intending to put it in here. It's a bit too big to go under the coaming there, and this turn indicator here is only a slip ball. The needle doesn't work, it's been removed. So I think I'm going to remove that completely, put a blanking plate in there and set the airpath compass in it. So the compass should sit quite nicely in there. I think that's better than the slip ball arrangement. We've got it upside down. There we are. Work even better that way up, and I won't get lost so easily. If you're an observant fan, or anorak, of my Aeroplane C3, then you'll notice in photographs about 25 years ago onwards that it grew a little venturi on the port side over there. And it did that because I changed the turn indicator in it from an enormous turn indicator that was about that long, electric powered, so of course it wasn't powered at all, it was only there for the slip ball, that had been stolen from a Sea Vixen by the previous owner, who was a Sea Vixen observer at Yeovilton at some point in the 1970s, and I changed it for a nice little air-driven 2-needle turn indicator that I think came out of a chipmunk or similar. Found it on eBay for a few quid, and it's worked a treat ever since. And the reason I did that, obviously, apart from actually having a turn indicator that worked, was that it saved pounds and pounds in weight, because the Sea Vixen instrument was enormous and 24 volt. Now this is rather clever, this one, because this has been cut down. Heaven only knows how big this instrument was, but everything's been removed except for the slip ball. However, the Sea Vixen turn indicator didn't go to waste, because my friend Sean, who rebuilt the thruster with me, dismantled the instrument carefully, took the slip ball out of it, and made a little wooden block for it to sit in, and put it on the panel in the thruster. So the thruster, which is probably the slowest aeroplane in the world, it makes the Aeroplane C3 look like a jet fighter, more like a Sea Vixen, has got a slip ball that no doubt has been supersonic several times. That amuses me no end. I'm wondering if I can do similar with this. Well, we're almost done for this part. I attacked a lot of the sheet metal work with a pan scrubber and hot soapy water and removed a lot of that corrosion. I can't get rid of it all completely, nor do I want to. It sort of wears its age quite well. I think a few more goes will get rid of more of it, maybe some wet and dry, but it doesn't look awful. I did this panel as well, and here, and the top cowling. There's obviously the panel that goes on the back of the aeroplane, but I'll keep bashing away at those. I took the screen off. This has had a go with T-cut. I'm slipping lots of bolts just to make sure there's not corrosion, so all these bolts will get slipped in time, checked, and then put back in, probably with lanolin around them, rather than that nasty zinc chromate paste that I absolutely detest. I want to make more progress with the undercarriage. I'm waiting for the tubing to arrive that slides over there. I told you about the sizes and everything. Unfortunately, my local stockist doesn't have it at the moment. It's on order. Hopefully it will come soon. I'd like to put the undercarriage back on temporarily once the wheels are changed, but once it's all happy and on its gear and the engine is off, and of course the fuselage would weigh a lot less then I'll take the undercarriage off again and get it all sandblasted and paint it all, I suppose, a nice bright red again. Well, that's it for now. As always, thank you for watching. Bingo!